Hey everybody, Dr. Ben here with Alpha Sports. Today what we're going to be going over is our fundamental foundational movements. So what we're going to be talking about is each of these movements and how they pertain to a lot of our different sports that we're doing, a lot of our different athletes that come in that need care for these certain sports, certain elements, certain dysfunctions and how they move. So what we're going to be going over is, like I said, these fundamental movements. What that's going to look like is being able to string these movements in together when you're having to go back out and do your sport, which is what translates into athletic peak performance. So that's why we work on these fundamental movements, especially when we're in here, because we have the time to. A lot of times when you're out with a team, or you're out with your trainers, or you're training just by yourself, you don't have somebody sitting there and picking apart how you're moving, how you're breathing. Are you stable? Are you mobile? Are you mobile and stable, but just in the correct joints? That actually translates into power, speed, efficiency, agility, those type things. So that's what we're going to be going over. So the reason we're going over these fundamental foundational movements is because it translates into that efficient mechanical endurance that we're talking about before, which directly translates into athletic peak performance, which is where you go out onto the field and perform at your best. We are helping with that efficient mechanical endurance in here through these foundational fundamental movements. So the reason that's huge is because we want to make sure that you as an athlete can own these positions. Shout out to Kelly Starrett for kind of giving us this owning a position, which means taking 10, 90% 1 rep max breaths in that position. So if it's a squat that you're trying to do, or if it's a running position, the fundamental foundational movement is a lunge. You need to be able to take 10, 90% 1 rep max breaths in that position to own it. All right, so this is Josh Godinez. He's one of our local CrossFit athletes, and he's going to be helping to demonstrate these foundational fundamental movements. So one of the first ones we have is, we'll just go ahead and go into an overhead. So the overhead position, you can see his shoulders are flexed, his elbows are by his ears, his cervical spine, thoracic spine, C-spine, T-spine, whatever you want to call it, is nice and straight. He's not hunched over the top, but his elbows are also extended. That is what I would say is he would own this position, especially if I made him sit there and take 10 of those breaths, which I'm not going to. He could. He's a very fit young man. He could. But this translates into, I don't know, any of our throwers that have to come over the top, any of our volleyball players from swinging their arms over the top trying to get a kill. This is how that translates into that, because they need to own this position so that they can own that position when they're trying to be in their sport and be dynamic at the same time. Okay, so Josh, go ahead and go into the front rack position for me. So this is a short lever front rack. So this is short lever front rack, and then we got long lever front rack as well. Shoulders are still flexed, biceps were flexed on the short lever, long lever has the triceps extended. And this essentially goes in from this position almost all the way down to here. It's still front rack up and through here. It depends on what the position or the sport he's in. So like rowing, it's all front rack because he's starting here and he'll just end in our next position, which is a press or push. So that's overhead, we have front rack, and then we're going to a press position, elbows back. So this is the end of a row. This is also the beginning and the end of a push-up. All right, so go ahead and show me your hang position, short lever hang position. So this is also the hang position. So this is going to be where you're picking really anything up from the ground. And it's short lever and long lever is having him extend his arms down almost as if he's going to pick up something off the ground. And this is not just sport specific, but also life, like picking up your child or doing something like that. Go ahead and go into a squat for me. So now we're moving on to the lower body or the hip foundational fundamental movements. So this is going to be full hip flexion, and he's going to be down into the squat. And he's got great dorsiflexion in his ankles, which allows his shins to stay tall, but also his knees to come forward. His torso is staying nice and tall. In this position, I want to see his torso and his shins match a pretty good angle so that they're nice and parallel with each other. In this position, to make sure that he owns it, I would make him take 10 more of those 90% 1 rep max breaths. One of the things that I love is that Josh's toes are pointed fairly neutral, pretty far forward, and pretty parallel. What we don't want to see is a ton of external rotation, because anything past 15 degrees of external rotation through your legs is actually going to start to deactivate your glute medius. And that's, a third of your glutes, so you don't really want to do that. You want to have that ability to drive those knees out when you come back up out of that position. The other portion of that squat is just a hinge. So come on up for me real quick, and then just hinge straight over like you're doing a deadlift. And so this is another squat archetype. It's still hip flexion, which is the main thing that we're looking at in this position right here. And this would be like a deadlift or anything else, or developing power to be able to explode off the line or to round a base or anything else like that, or to sit in a receiving position for volleyball, baseball, softball, being able to take off from those positions. So the next one we're going to get into, he's going to go down into a lunge. This one almost every athlete uses because this is going to mimic our running. Their ability to get their hip flexed and their other hip extended at the exact same time. Being able to own this position is super important. Being able to drive power from the ground and also stay stable through his midline the whole entire time. So that breath is very important. So we definitely want to make sure that we're making him do those 10, 90% 1 rep max breaths in this position as well. So he's now getting into a pistol. So what we want to see is him to be able to own that position. I don't need him to get down into it and then get back up out of it. What I want to be able to see is he can get down into there, have enough dorsiflexion in his ankle and his knee tracks over his foot like it needs to, and enough hip flexion to be able to sit down in that position. And then he would want to take those 10, 90% 1 rep max breaths in that position to show that he owns that position. So those are your 7 fundamental foundational movements.